The meeting room smelled of fresh coffee and expensive perfume. Leather chairs circled a polished mahogany table that reflected the warm glow of ceiling lights. Parents arrived one by one, their designer handbags clicking against chair legs, their voices soft but self-assured. This was Riverside Academy's quarterly parent-teacher conference, and everyone who was anyone made sure to attend. At the far end of the table sat a man who didn't quite fit the picture. His name was Daniel Carter. He wore a simple button-down shirt, clean but slightly wrinkled at the elbows. His jeans were dark, his shoes worn but polished. He sat with his hands folded on the table, shoulders straight, eyes calm. Beside him sat his daughter, Emma. She was 9 years old, with soft brown hair tied back in a ponytail and eyes that observed everything quietly. She wore her school uniform neatly, her small hands resting in her lap. Daniel had raised Emma alone since she was 2. Her mother had walked out without explanation, leaving behind only silence and a little girl who learned early not to ask questions. Since then, Daniel had worked 2 jobs. He was a warehouse supervisor during the day and drove for a rideshare service 3 nights a week. He never complained. He never explained. He simply showed up, for Emma, every single time. Emma had earned a scholarship to Riverside Academy based on merit. Her test scores were exceptional. Her essays had impressed the admissions board. But none of that seemed to matter once people saw Daniel's car in the parking lot. A 10-year-old sedan with a dented bumper and a faded paint job. The head teacher, Mrs. Langford, entered the room with a practiced smile. She was in her early 50s, sharp-eyed, and carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades shaping young minds. She took her seat at the head of the table and opened a folder. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for making time to be here. Tonight, we'll be discussing the upcoming school fundraiser and reviewing student progress reports." Murmurs of approval circled the table. Mrs. Langford's gaze swept across the parents, pausing briefly on Daniel before moving on. Emma noticed. She always noticed. The discussion began with talk of donations, event sponsorships, and silent auctions. One mother, dressed in a cream blazer and pearls, spoke enthusiastically about contributing a vacation package to the fundraiser. Another father mentioned his company's willingness to match donations up to $10,000. Applause followed. Smiles were exchanged. Then Mrs. Langford's eyes landed on Daniel again. "Mr. Carter," she said, her tone polite but pointed, "we haven't heard from you yet. Will you be participating in the fundraiser this year?" Daniel met her gaze without flinching. "I'll contribute what I can, Mrs. Langford. My focus is making sure Emma has what she needs for her education." A few parents exchanged glances. One woman, seated directly across from Daniel, leaned forward slightly. Her name was Monica Ashford. Her son was in Emma's class, and she had made it clear on more than one occasion that she believed scholarships diluted the school's prestige. "That's admirable, Mr. Carter," Monica said, her voice sweet but edged. "But education isn't just about tuition, is it? It's about community involvement, networking, showing our children the value of giving back." Daniel's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "I work 2 jobs, Mrs. Ashford. I give back by making sure my daughter grows up with integrity and respect. That's worth more than a check." Monica's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course. But surely you understand that children notice these things. They see who contributes and who doesn't." Emma's hands clenched in her lap. Her face remained calm, but her eyes glistened. Another parent, a man in a tailored suit, chimed in. "Look, no one's questioning your effort, Carter. But this is Riverside Academy. Standards matter here. If people can't keep up, maybe they should reconsider whether this is the right environment." Daniel's breathing slowed. He didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at the man, then at Monica, then at Mrs. Langford, who said nothing. "My daughter earned her place here," Daniel said quietly. "She didn't buy it. She earned it. And she'll keep earning it every day, not because of my bank account, but because of who she is." Monica let out a soft laugh. "That's touching, really. But you have to understand how this looks. Parents invest heavily in this school. We expect a certain standard. It's uncomfortable when... When what? Daniel interrupted, his voice still calm but now carrying weight. When someone who works for a living shows up. When someone's worth isn't measured by their car or their clothes. The room went silent. Mrs. Langford shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Monica's expression hardened. I'm simply saying that if you can't afford to participate fully, perhaps a public school would be a better fit for Emma. Emma's breath hitched. She looked down at her hands, blinking rapidly. Daniel was about to respond when the door to the conference room opened. Everyone turned. A man stepped inside. He was tall, in his late 50s, with silver hair combed back and a gray suit that fit him like it had been made for his frame alone. His presence filled the room instantly, not through volume, but through sheer quiet authority. His eyes scanned the table, taking in every face, before landing on Daniel. He froze. For a moment no one spoke. The man's expression shifted from surprise to something deeper, something that looked almost like regret. Mrs. Langford stood quickly. Mr. Harrington, we weren't expecting you. Jonathan Harrington, owner of Riverside Academy. A man who had built the institution from the ground up 30 years ago and rarely attended parent meetings anymore. His appearance here was unusual. His reaction even more so. He didn't acknowledge Mrs. Langford. His eyes stayed fixed on Daniel. Daniel, he said quietly. Daniel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. History. Jonathan, Daniel replied, his voice even. The room's energy shifted. Parents who had been whispering moments ago now sat in stunned silence. Monica's confident smirk faded. The man in the tailored suit straightened in his seat. Jonathan stepped further into the room, his gaze sweeping over the faces at the table before returning to Daniel. I didn't know you were here, Jonathan said. I didn't know Emma was enrolled. She earned a scholarship, Daniel said simply. On her own merit. Jonathan nodded slowly, his jaw tight. He looked at Emma, and his expression softened. She looks like you. Emma glanced up, confused but curious. Jonathan turned to Mrs. Langford. What's going on here? Mrs. Langford hesitated. We were discussing the fundraiser, Mr. Harrington. Just routine matters. Routine. Jonathan's tone sharpened. He looked at Monica, then at the man in the suit. It didn't sound routine when I walked in. No one answered. Jonathan turned back to Daniel. Were you being disrespected? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He glanced at Emma, then back at Jonathan. It's handled. No, Jonathan said firmly. It's not. He faced the table, his voice calm but unmistakably firm. Daniel Carter is one of the most decent men I've ever known. He and I served together. He saved my life. The room went completely still. Jonathan continued, his voice steady. We were deployed overseas 20 years ago. Our convoy was ambushed. Daniel pulled me out of a burning vehicle while under fire. He carried me half a mile to safety. I wouldn't be standing here if it weren't for him. Monica's face had gone pale. The man in the suit looked down at the table. After we came home, Jonathan went on, Daniel chose a quiet life. He didn't ask for recognition. He didn't use his service to open doors. He just worked. He raised his daughter. He lived with integrity. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. And tonight, you humiliated him. Mrs. Langford opened her mouth, but Jonathan raised a hand. I built this school on the belief that character matters more than wealth, that merit matters more than status. If that's no longer true here, then I've failed. He looked directly at Monica. Mrs. Ashford, your son's tuition will be refunded. You're no longer welcome at Riverside Academy. Monica's eyes widened. You can't. I own this school, Jonathan said quietly. I absolutely can. He turned to the man in the suit. Mr. Preston, the same applies to you. The man's face reddened, but he said nothing. Jonathan addressed the entire room. This institution was built to educate young minds and build character. If any of you believe that wealth is a substitute for decency, you're in the wrong place. He looked at Emma, his expression softening again. Emma, you belong here. Not because of who your father knows, but because of who you are. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Jonathan turned to Daniel. I'm sorry. I should have known you were here. I should have checked in. Daniel shook his head. You didn't owe me that, Jonathan. Yes, Jonathan said firmly. I did. The meeting ended shortly after. Parents filed out in silence, avoiding eye contact with Daniel and Emma. Mrs. Langford apologized quietly before leaving. Monica and Mr. Preston left without a word, their faces tight with humiliation. When the room finally emptied, Jonathan sat down beside Daniel. You should have called me, Jonathan said. I didn't want favors, Daniel replied. Emma earned her place. That's all that mattered. Jonathan smiled faintly. You haven't changed. Neither have you. They sat in silence for a moment. Two men bound by history, by sacrifice, by choices made long ago. Emma looked between them, her confusion giving way to understanding. You saved his life? She asked her father softly. Daniel looked at her and nodded. A long time ago, and you never told me. It wasn't important, Daniel said gently. What's important is that you know your worth doesn't come from what people think. It comes from who you are. Emma's tears finally spilled over, but she smiled. Jonathan stood, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. Emma's tuition is covered. Fully. And if anyone ever disrespects either of you again, I want to know immediately. Daniel started to protest, but Jonathan cut him off. This isn't charity, Daniel. This is me paying a debt I'll never fully repay. Let me do this. Daniel met his eyes, then nodded slowly. Jonathan looked at Emma one last time. Work hard. Be kind. Make your father proud. Though I suspect you already do. Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. Jonathan left the room quietly, the door clicking softly behind him. Daniel and Emma sat together in the now empty conference room, the weight of the evening settling around them. Daniel reached over and gently squeezed Emma's hand. Are you okay? He asked. Emma nodded, her voice small but steady. I'm proud of you, Dad. Daniel's throat tightened. He pulled her into a hug, resting his chin on the top of her head. I'm proud of you too, sweetheart. Always. They left the school together, walking through the quiet hallways and out into the cool night air. The parking lot was nearly empty now. Their old sedan sat under a flickering streetlight, dented bumper and all. But tonight it didn't matter. Daniel opened the passenger door for Emma, and she climbed in, her backpack settled on her lap. He closed the door gently, walked around to the driver's side, and got in. As he started the engine, Emma looked over at him. Dad. Yeah. Do you think they'll treat us differently now? Daniel thought about that for a moment, his hands resting on the steering wheel. Maybe, he said honestly. But that's on them, not us. We haven't changed. We're still the same people we were when we walked in. Emma nodded, processing that. And Emma, Daniel continued, his voice soft but firm. No matter what anyone says, no matter how much money they have or what car they drive, you earned your place. You belong there. Not because of me. Not because of Mr. Harrington. Because of you. Emma smiled, her eyes still a little red but clear now. I know, Dad. Daniel smiled back, then pulled out of the parking lot and headed home. If you've ever felt judged for things beyond your control, drop a comment. Sometimes the most valuable people are the ones the world overlooks. The next morning, Daniel woke to the sound of his alarm at 5:30. He showered quickly, dressed in his warehouse uniform, and made breakfast for Emma. She came downstairs in her school uniform, quieter than usual but not withdrawn. She ate her toast and eggs slowly, glancing at her father every so often. You okay? Daniel asked, pouring her a glass of orange juice. Yeah, Emma said. Just thinking. About last night? She nodded. Daniel sat down across from her. You want to talk about it? Emma took a sip of juice, then set the glass down carefully. Why didn't you ever tell me? About Mr. Harrington. About what you did. Daniel leaned back in his chair, choosing his words carefully. Because it wasn't about me. What happened over there, it was just what anyone would have done. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it was right. But people should know, Emma said quietly. People like Mrs. Ashford. They should know who you are. Daniel shook his head gently. People like Mrs. Ashford will always find something to judge. If it's not money, it's something else. You can't live your life trying to prove yourself to people who've already decided not to see you. Emma absorbed that, her young mind working through the weight of it. But it still hurt, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. Yeah, it did. And it's okay to feel that. But we don't let it define us. We keep going. We keep working. We keep being who we are. Emma squeezed his hand back. Okay. They finished breakfast in comfortable silence. Daniel packed Emma's lunch, grabbed his keys, and they headed out the door together. He dropped her off at school, watching until she disappeared through the front doors before driving to the warehouse. Work was steady. Daniel supervised shipments, coordinated deliveries, and kept his crew on schedule. His boss, a gruff man named Tom, noticed Daniel was quieter than usual. You good, Carter? Tom asked during their lunch break. Yeah, Daniel said. Just a long night. Tom grunted. Well, you're one of my best. Don't burn out on me. I won't. That evening, Daniel picked Emma up from school. She climbed into the car with a small smile. How was your day? Daniel asked. Different, Emma said. Different how? Some kids were nicer. Some teachers too. Mrs. Langford asked if I was okay. And are you? Emma thought about it. Yeah, I think so. Daniel nodded. Good. They drove home, and Daniel made dinner while Emma did her homework at the kitchen table. It was a quiet evening, simple and familiar. After dinner, they watched a nature documentary together on the couch. Emma fell asleep halfway through, her head resting against Daniel's shoulder. He carried her to bed, tucked her in, and kissed her forehead. Good night, sweetheart, he whispered. 2 days later, Daniel received a phone call. It was Jonathan Harrington. Daniel, do you have a few minutes? Yeah. What's up? I wanted to follow up. Make sure everything's been okay since the meeting. It's fine, Jonathan. Really. Good. But I also wanted to ask you something. Daniel waited. I'm looking for someone to oversee security and operations at the school. Someone I trust. Someone with integrity. I'd like you to consider it. Daniel blinked, caught off guard. Jonathan, I appreciate it, but I'm not qualified for that. You're more qualified than anyone I know, Jonathan said firmly. You understand discipline. You understand people. And you understand what this school is supposed to stand for. I've got 2 jobs already. I can't just... This would replace both, Jonathan interrupted. Better pay, better hours, benefits, health insurance, a retirement plan, and Emma's tuition, fully covered, through graduation. Daniel was silent. I'm not offering this out of pity, Jonathan continued. I'm offering it because you're the right person. Think about it. Daniel exhaled slowly. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. They ended the call, and Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. Emma walked in, noticing his expression. What's wrong, Dad? Nothing's wrong, Daniel said, looking up at her. Mr. Harrington just offered me a job. At the school. Yeah. Emma's eyes lit up. Are you going to take it? I don't know yet. Why not? Daniel sighed. Because I don't want people thinking I'm taking it because of what happened. Or because he owes me. Emma sat down across from him, her expression serious. Dad, you told me that we don't let other people define us. That we keep being who we are. If you want the job, take it. If you don't, don't. But don't say no because you're worried about what people think. Daniel stared at his daughter, a slow smile spreading across his face. When did you get so smart? Emma grinned. I learned from the best. Daniel laughed, reaching over to ruffle her hair. All right, I'll think about it. Seriously. Over the next few days, Daniel considered the offer carefully. He talked to Tom at the warehouse, who told him to take the opportunity. He talked to a few friends who all said the same thing. And he talked to Emma, who reminded him every day that he deserved good things too. Finally, Daniel called Jonathan back. "I'll take the job." Jonathan's relief was audible. "I'm glad. When can you start?" "2 weeks. I need to give notice at my current jobs." "Of course." "Thank you, Daniel." "Thank you, Jonathan." 2 weeks later, Daniel started his new role at Riverside Academy. He arrived early on his first day, wearing a collared shirt and slacks, his expression calm but focused. Jonathan met him at the entrance and walked him through the campus, introducing him to staff, explaining procedures, and laying out expectations. Daniel absorbed everything, asked the right questions, and got to work. Within a month, the school's security protocols were tighter, operations ran smoother, and staff morale improved. Daniel didn't command through authority, he led through presence, through respect, through quiet competence. Emma thrived. Her grades remained excellent, and she made new friends. Some parents who had witnessed the meeting began to approach Daniel with genuine respect. Others kept their distance, which suited him fine. Monica Ashford's son transferred to another school. Mr. Preston did the same. Mrs. Langford, to her credit, apologized to Daniel privately and worked to rebuild trust. One afternoon, Daniel was walking through the courtyard when he saw Emma sitting with a group of classmates, laughing at something one of them said. She looked happy, confident, free. Jonathan appeared beside him, following his gaze. "She's doing well," Jonathan said. "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "She is." "You did that." Daniel shook his head. "She did that." Jonathan smiled. "You're a good father, Daniel." "I'm trying. That's all any of us can do." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the kids play. "Thank you," Daniel said quietly, "for giving me this chance." Jonathan looked at him. "I didn't give you anything, Daniel. You earned it, just like Emma earned her place here." Daniel nodded, a faint smile on his face. Months passed. Daniel settled into his role, becoming a quiet fixture at Riverside Academy. He was respected by staff, trusted by parents, and admired by students. Emma continued to excel, not because of who her father was, but because of who she was becoming. One evening, as they sat together at the kitchen table working on a puzzle, Emma looked up at her father. "Dad." "Yeah. I'm glad we didn't leave." Daniel paused, looking at her. "Me too, sweetheart. And I'm glad Mr. Harrington walked in that night." Daniel smiled. "So am I." Emma returned to the puzzle, her small hands fitting pieces together carefully. Daniel watched her, his heart full. He had spent years believing that providing for Emma meant sacrifice, meant working until exhaustion, meant accepting disrespect in silence. But that night in the conference room had taught him something else. It taught him that dignity isn't something you earn through money or status. It's something you carry within yourself. And it taught him that sometimes, the people who see you clearly are the ones who've walked beside you through fire. Years later, Emma would graduate from Riverside Academy with honors. She would go on to college, then medical school, becoming the kind of person who fought for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And Daniel would be there, every step of the way, proud not because of what she achieved, but because of who she remained. A girl who knew her worth. A girl who had learned from her father that integrity isn't loud. It's quiet. That strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. And that the people who matter most are the ones who see you, even when the world doesn't. Riverside Academy continued to thrive under Jonathan's leadership, and Daniel's steady presence helped shape a culture of respect and merit. But the real legacy wasn't in policies or procedures. It was in the small moments, in the way Daniel greeted every student by name, in the way he listened when staff had concerns, in the way he never used his position to elevate himself but always to lift others, and in the way Emma walked through those halls every day, her head high, her heart kind, knowing that she belonged, not because someone gave her permission, but because she had earned it, and so had her father. If this story reminded you why character will always outlast status, consider subscribing. We share stories about real strength, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. The school year ended quietly. On the last day, as parents arrived to pick up their children, Daniel stood near the entrance, watching the controlled chaos of summer's arrival. Kids ran across the lawn with backpacks bouncing, teachers waved goodbye, and the air smelled of cut grass and freedom. Emma emerged from the building with a small group of friends. They were laughing, talking about summer plans, already making promises to stay in touch. When she spotted Daniel, she said her goodbyes and jogged over. "Ready to go?" Daniel asked. "Yeah," Emma said, grinning. Finally. They walked toward the parking lot together, Emma chattering about her final exams and the art project she'd turned in that morning. Daniel listened, smiling at her enthusiasm, grateful for the ease in her voice. As they reached the car, Jonathan appeared, walking across the parking lot toward them. "Daniel, Emma," he greeted them warmly. "Mr. Harrington," Emma said politely. "I wanted to catch you before you left for the summer," Jonathan said. "I wanted to say thank you. This has been one of the best years we've had in a long time, and a lot of that is because of you, Daniel." Daniel shook his head. "I just did my job." "You did more than that," Jonathan insisted. "You reminded this place what it was supposed to be." Daniel didn't respond, but his expression softened. Jonathan looked at Emma. "And you, young lady, had an exceptional year. Your teachers speak very highly of you." Emma's cheeks flushed. "Thank you. Enjoy your summer, both of you," Jonathan said. "You've earned it." They said their goodbyes and Daniel and Emma climbed into the car. As they drove away from the school, Emma looked out the window, watching Riverside Academy fade into the distance. "Dad." "Yeah. I like it here now." Daniel glanced at her, then back at the road. "I'm glad. I didn't think I would," Emma admitted, "after that night. But it's different now." "Things change," Daniel said quietly. "People change. Sometimes for the better." Emma nodded, then leaned back in her seat, content. That summer, Daniel and Emma took a road trip. They drove up the coast, stopping at small towns and scenic overlooks, eating at diners and walking along beaches. It was the first real vacation they'd taken in years, and they soaked up every moment. One evening, as they sat on a beach watching the sunset, Emma asked a question that had been on her mind for a while. "Dad, do you ever think about Mom?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He stared out at the ocean, the waves rolling in steady and endless. "Sometimes," he said finally. "Not as much as I used to." "Do you miss her?" Daniel considered that. "I miss the idea of what we could have been. But I don't miss the person she was when she left." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Do you think she ever thinks about us?" Daniel looked at his daughter, her face lit by the golden light of the setting sun. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But it doesn't matter. We're okay. You're okay. That's what matters." Emma nodded slowly, then leaned against his shoulder. "Yeah, we're okay." They sat in silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon, the sky turning shades of pink and orange. When the new school year began, Emma returned to Riverside Academy with renewed confidence. She joined the debate team, volunteered for the school's community outreach program, and continued to excel academically. Her friendships deepened, and she became known not just as a smart kid, but as someone who stood up for others. One day, a new student arrived at the school, a girl named Sophia whose family had recently immigrated. Sophia was shy, struggled with English, and seemed overwhelmed by the newness of everything. Some students ignored her. Others whispered behind her back. Emma noticed. During lunch, Emma sat down next to Sophia, who was eating alone at the corner of the cafeteria. "Hi," Emma said. "I'm Emma." Sophia looked up, surprised. "Hi. Mind if I sit here?" Sophia shook her head, and Emma smiled. They didn't talk much that first day, but Emma kept showing up. Day after day, she sat with Sophia, asked her questions, helped her with homework, and introduced her to other kind classmates. Slowly, Sophia began to open up. Her English improved. Her smile came easier. One afternoon, Sophia's mother approached Daniel after school. "Mr. Carter?" Daniel turned. Yes. I'm Sophia's mother. I just wanted to thank you. And your daughter. Emma has been so kind to Sophia. It's made all the difference. Daniel's expression softened. That's all Emma. She's got a good heart. She learned it from you, Sophia's mother said quietly. Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he simply nodded. That evening, Daniel told Emma what Sophia's mother had said. Emma shrugged, a little embarrassed. I just didn't want her to feel alone. You did the right thing, Daniel said. I know what it feels like, Emma admitted. To be the one people don't see. Daniel pulled her into a hug. I see you, sweetheart. Always. I know, Dad. The years continued to unfold quietly. Daniel remained at Riverside Academy, and Emma grew into a young woman who carried herself with grace, intelligence, and compassion. She graduated as valedictorian. Her speech focused not on achievement, but on kindness, resilience, and the importance of seeing people for who they truly are. Daniel sat in the audience, his eyes wet, his heart bursting with pride. After the ceremony, Jonathan found him. You did it, Jonathan said. She did it, Daniel corrected. You both did, Jonathan said firmly. And I'm honored to have been a part of it. Daniel shook his hand. Thank you, Jonathan, for everything. No, Jonathan said quietly. Thank you. Emma went on to college, then medical school, just as she had dreamed. She chose pediatrics, driven by a desire to help children who felt unseen, unheard, or afraid. She became the kind of doctor who remembered names, who sat on the floor to talk to kids at eye level, who never rushed a consultation. Daniel continued his work at Riverside Academy, mentoring students, supporting staff, and quietly shaping the culture of a place that had once tried to push him out. And on the anniversary of that night in the conference room, Daniel and Emma always took a moment to reflect. Not with bitterness, not with pride, but with gratitude, because that night had taught them both something invaluable. That worth isn't something other people give you. It's something you claim for yourself. That dignity isn't bought or sold. It's carried. And that the people who see you clearly, who stand beside you when the world turns away, those are the people who matter. Everything else is just noise. And so, years after that humiliating night, Daniel Carter and his daughter Emma lived lives defined not by the judgments of others, but by the choices they made, the kindness they showed, and the integrity they carried. They had been tested. They had been dismissed. They had been underestimated. But they had never been broken. And in the end, that was all that mattered.